Happy February 22nd, the 22nd day of Black History Month. I am Dr. Lisa, and I've been coming live for the past 22 days to talk about lessons that should have been learned from Black History Month. This is all about celebrating the 100-year anniversary of Black History Month and recognizing areas where we have not learned and how we can go about learning and creating change for the future for a more inclusive world and workplace so that we can all elevate within our professional careers and personally learning lessons, ideas, focuses on ways of moving forward for a better future. And today's topic is based on accountability means never again. That is something that should be understood from Black History Month, of course, right? And it's sad that I have to do these talks, but necessary that I do these talks because accountability has not really occurred because the things of the past are continuing today and on into the future. With that being said, so what does accountability even look like when we speak about Black History Month and the need for learning from the past? And really, that means nothing, honestly. And we could start by the fact that there never was accountability for slavery. There never was truly accountability for even the lack of reparations for Jim Crow and the continued inclusivity of society. And that is one thing that must be understood. So even to have to mention accountability when we look at it within the workplace and within society in America, and to have that word float around as if there is a symbol of example for that, there is none. I mean, we can say, yes, there is, because there's been some recognition when it comes to Native Americans and Asians and other, demographics, right? But when we look at African Americans, when we look at Black people in American society and how we have come to be in America, there has been no accountability. And accountability is never even a thought of, even when we focus on the idea of reparations of the past and Reconstruction. There was no Reconstruction. Hi, thanks for joining, Viviana. There was no form of Reconstruction, as we know, because the idea of that was more based on, hi Carlos, how are you doing? Thank you for joining me. That was based on the idea of reparations going to slave owners and those, because they suffered because slaves were freed, but not reparations for, good to hear that, Carlos, not for reparations for slaves. And then on into freed Black men. We'll say it as that, freed Africans or enslaved Africans, right? So when we look at what accountability really is, there is no form of accountability. And then it's just the idea of acceptance that it's over and we're supposed to just figure it out and move on, right? So we're almost 500 years later, still in the figure out and move on stage without any real recognition of what the past was. So as we sit and think about this 100 years of Black History Month, which is designed for us to reflect and learn and to never forget, you cannot have accountability if the idea is to just forget. That in itself shows that accountability is not real, right? So when we look at that in American society, we're carrying this into the future, and it's going from generation to generation to now, as we live in society, knowing that there never really was a form of accountability, knowing that those systems designed to build the American infrastructure and design of how we go about creating opportunities in America, those systems are still built on the ways of the past. Now, forward to present day, those systems are within our not just society, but within our school systems, within our businesses that we work for, right? And every day of part of our life. Oh, sorry. For I'm reading the comment, everyone from Dirty Bird. It said, "Would you be comfortable going after Spain, Italy, Portugal, Mexico, and other Latino countries for reparations and accountability?" I feel that every country that was a part of the transatlantic slave trade does hold responsibility, for some form of reparations. So yes, I do agree with that. And you see, I'm so focused on this right now. I'm sorry. So even asking that question, Dirty Bird, I would have to do more research because I don't know offhand what countries do recognize, some form of reparations, but just off top of my head, I know speaking on for the indigenous, I know Canada has, made some apologies, right? And I know Australia has made apologies, right, for forms of slavery and you know, oppression of indigenous, but I have to look further into that. That's actually a good topic that I can do for the future. But yes, I do feel as though all nations that participated in the transatlantic slave trade hold responsibility and owe forms of reparations. So, yes, I do agree with that. And we can't deny that. To deny it is to pretend it never occurred. And that's the whole point of why we have history, right? To prevent that and to learn from that. And I think people forget that reparations is not a bad thing. It's nothing wrong with that, acknowledging that wrong was done. And that's where people lose sight because of the fear of what is assumed about a country or people can't move. Fear learn today because you want to live in denial. And that is very frustrating for us. I know for me as a Black woman and me working in an HR space where I do DEI work and this type of work and having these types of talks to have to speak constantly to remind, all because the accountability was never there. There was never, and we are sorry for slavery. We are sorry for the abuses that occurred. We are sorry for the continued abuses that occurred. And the recognition of that, even when we look at now how the understanding of slavery is being understood within American society and how government is going about it with the removal of slavery from national national museum from the National Museum and national sites. Yes, the removal of slavery. So if we're already removing it, that's moving into it never happened. The wiping away from history. Because if we can walk by and that information has been removed, how are we ensuring that it is understood that we have learned from the past and that we are trying to move forward? So this is why it's important and why I've decided to have these talks, because we are removing the identity of America. Slavery is a part of American identity, regardless of how uncomfortable it may be, regardless of how embarrassing it may be, regardless of how, you know, hateful it can make people be vilified and viewed as. It is something that occurred, and it is something that, was never truly acknowledged as wrong. That is something that we need to face and look in the eye and scream to the mountaintops, because there's too much denial. And that's because there's never been accountability. And accountability is not just saying that, oh, slavery happened and we're going to put up this monument. That is not accountability. Not for the millions that were stolen and thrown into enslavement and abused for more than 500 years. I am very educated. Thank you. And moving forward to the understanding of how this nation was founded and built and created, It's not something you can walk away from. Even when you look into the designing of systems and the structures of how we move about in society now. You can choose to live in a form of denial, which is fine. We all have free will and we all have the right to believe what we want. But just because we have that right doesn't mean it is correct, right? That's the hard part, and it's fearful because who wants to believe that the world is that evil? That's a thing that we have to face, that the world is evil, that the evils that we're living in now are based on the evils that were created from the past. And there's nothing wrong with that. All we have to do is learn from it. That's all we have to do. And it's okay, to feel a type of way about it. We're human, and these emotions are pure and real and raw. So it's okay to have those emotions. All it is about learning from it and recognizing to respect. That's all. No need to name call. No need to disrespect anyone. This is an open space, and I welcome people to speak, but this is not an environment to name call. So thank you, whoever removed that comment. I appreciate that, because I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here for us all to learn so that we can all move forward in life and have a better life, a better society for all of us. And it starts with how we move without in our spaces and inspiring others as well. And that means also within the workplace, because I work in HR, so I'm all about, if we can change the workspace, then we can change the world. And we spend so much of our lives working, right? So why are we not happy when we work? Especially when we see that the systems that we're working in are based on the systems of the past. They're based on systems of the past. So for that to be a thing, how can we move about and learn from that so that we can make a better future? That's something we need to do. So, what does accountability look like when we're looking? We spoke about accountability from the past and how it's moved into the future. So now we're going to focus on how that has enacted into our workspaces and how we work and how we go about work, right? So accountability, of course, means never again. And also when we look at lack of, and also when we're looking at accountability and what does that mean and is it really occurring, right? So in the workspace, when we see lack of accountability, we're seeing people be warned, but not truly reprimanded, right? Or they're receiving some forms of training, sensitivity training or anything like that, but never anything forward if the behavior continues. It's just kind of viewed as, and I spoke about this in one of the earlier talks within the weeks, of the intention versus the actual impact, right? And you may say that you don't intend to harm someone, right? But the harm that you've committed has is real. So regardless of your intention, you should still be held accountable. And that actually is a legal fact too. That goes into legal aspects as well. So it's not just within the workspace. It's not just within the workspace. It's also, I should have turned my do not disturb off. Sorry. It's not just within the workspace. It's also, not just within, just the workspace, but also legally as well. That's a legal aspect of it as well. So that's, of course, when we speak of business, legalities come into it. Of course, HR is there to ensure that legalities are held within. That's why intention matters. It matters, but it does not mean that you are not innocent or not liable because you've inflicted harm. That is something that must be understood. And within organizations, it's always, the shock of something happening. But one thing we must understand is that nothing should ever shock us, right? We're living in a world where behaviors are constantly repeated, maybe in a different way, but evil always is there, right? Or bad behaviors are always there. So the idea of shock, but not holding accountable for real consequences through the consequences that have occurred, you can't deter from that. And you can't allow to linger either. And it can look like, fake accountability can look like a lot of different things within the workplace, like multiple complaints that are happening, and then people keep their job, or they keep their position, or they're never being even talked about, or talked to, I should say, about a situation. When that these situations are not just based on, DEI type stuff or racism or anything like that. This is anything within a workplace, and the understanding that accountability is action not being taken, no investigation being taken, not even the coverage of what even really happened, and not even looking to investigate whether the harm has stopped completely or permanently, or just maybe a little bit, or what are the actual consequences, and are those consequences even legitimate based on the actions that have occurred. And just really having an understanding of what's working and what is not. And that's how you move forward. And from there, that enacts you stepping up and other people as well stepping up also. You stepping up and other people stepping up also. That is something that is very important to understand, because as I've said, accountability is taking action. As I've said, we're learning from the past that no actions were ever really taken. So how can we move forward from that if we're not learning from the past, but we expect to move forward within the future? That is one thing that must be understood. And that can only be understood by actually having real policies and following those actual policies and ensuring that accountability actually occurs. That means speaking up when you see wrongs are happening, and then ensuring that those wrongs never occur again. Accountability means never again. And that is something that we as a society have to speak on, and we in the workplace have to ensure is happening. Never again. And that's from all aspects. And that's a lesson that we must learn and should have learned a long time ago when it comes to Black History Month. And that is something that we as a society needs to make sure is held accountable when it comes to chattel slavery and the enslavement of Africans. Reparations is real, and reparations will occur, regardless of what anyone that comes in my comments has to say. The talks that I have are real. The talks that I have reflect true society and true issues within the workplace. Having a recognition that no accountability has ever occurred is why we continue to struggle in society and why this country will never be great, because of the denial. And it can be said for other nations as well that are always struggling when it comes to issues of youth, because issues of youth and their dissatisfaction is because of the recognition of facts when it comes to the nation that they live and thought that they loved. The recognition that what we once believed is not really true. And that goes the same within workspaces, and the idea that everyone is viewed as equal, but really not, because accountability doesn't really occur. We see it with how leaders in C-suites are treated in a higher regard versus the employees that actually drive business success, with unfair compensation and different forms of with continued and learned from the systems enacted from the past that is brought into the future to create this corporate society built on systemic barriers and systemic ideology. Until we strengthen our systems and eradicate the ways of the past through new development of policies and processes, actual accountability for those that enact policies to ensure inequity, only then will we truly progress. And inequity is not about giving an upper hand. It's about balance for fair opportunity. Until that is understood, nothing will ever be what it could be. This is why the issues of the past continue to haunt us into the future, because we are not moving forward in an equitable way. This was an interesting talk, and I'm glad that everyone has joined me today. We're moving into, it's 7:19. It's a busy Sunday. I'm getting ready to catch this fight with Clarissa Shields. Looking forward to that. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. Thank you for joining me. And I'll be here again tomorrow. And until then, love yourself and others and be the change. Bye.